Okay, we are continuing in our study of the book of Daniel. We are continuing with chapter 8. We left off with verse 8 last time, and we did look at verses 20 and 21, but we're going to look at those again as we go through this study. This is probably one of the most important studies in the book of Daniel. I say that because this is a study that misrepresentation here led to, or has led to, many cults that have been formed. And we'll be talking about those as we go through our study. This is part of the prophetic section. We're just going to review the prophetic section as we study today because we don't have time to do all of them. Anyway, I want you to understand and look very closely at the content and context of what we're studying. This is very important. We're going to start with chapter 2, which is kind of the it's kind of the basis that shows us all of it, and we want to understand what we're dealing with here. And this is the dream of Nebuchadnezzar. It's given in 604 BC. That's important. And this is a statement of all of the kingdoms by God, a statement by God of all of the kingdoms that will rule over Israel from the time of Daniel until beyond our time. And we'll be showing this again and illustrating what we're talking about there. But this was the king's image, and the king's image had a head of gold, which represented Babylon, the arms and breast of silver, 2 arms, and that's important in the recognition of who we're talking about. Then the belly and thighs were of grease, and we will see that also. 2 legs of iron represented Rome, and Rome divided into East and West Rome. We showed that in our last study. Anyway, that image comes down to 10 toes, and that's very important. Finally, there was a stone cut out without hand and cast and hit the image in the feet, in the toes, and busted the image, and it flitted away like fluff. Anyway, that's the entire history of the earth relative to Israel. From the time of the 600 BC area until future beyond us. The next prophetic passage that we've seen comes in Daniel chapter 7. And again, this is chapter 7, gave us the prophecy of the whole world, gave us some wild beasts, and showed us images of each of those representing the nations. We saw Babylon represented by a lion, had wings. The wings were plucked off, and it stood up like a man. Then Medo-Persia was like a bear, having 3 ribs in its mouth, and we saw that it conquered 3 areas there. Then we saw Greece, which was like a leopard, moving fast, and had 4 heads. Then Rome was represented by a beast that it couldn't really describe. It was just terrible. It was horrible. Anyway, these were the beast of the entire world, and we saw that this beast had 10 horns. The final beast of Rome had 10 horns, representing 10 kings. And we saw the intrigue of 3 of those being plucked out by the roots, being replaced by 1 little horn. And then we had chapter 8, which we started in our last study. We will complete it in our next study. But anyway, we've already had 2 studies in chapter 8. And again, the kingdoms were represented by wild beasts. But this time there are only two. And it's talking about only two kingdoms. It's talking about Medo-Persia and Greece. Only those two kingdoms in this particular chapter. And we're seeing the details of those two kingdoms as we go through that chapter. We saw that they were represented by, first of all, Aram having two horns, one higher than the other, and then Greece represented by a he-goat with a single horn at the start that took over the Medo-Persians. I'd like to go to verses 20 and 21 of chapter 8 to show primarily that I didn't make up who these various ones are. Let's read the verses there. The ram, that's the ram that we saw in the picture there, the ram which thou sawest having two horns are the kings of Media and Persia. I didn't make that up. It's right there. God said it. Verse 21, and the rough goat is the king of Grecia. That's Greece. And the great horn between his eyes is the first king. That first king is Alexander the Great. Now, scholars and preachers have often tried to stretch this particular chapter to all the way to future kingdoms. It's not. It's represented by the past. We can look back and we can see the history. And many cults have been created by dealing with chapter 8 of Daniel and coming up with some various things. Jesus instructed us relative to this. And then if any man shall say to you, lo, here is Christ. Now that's what those cults are developed on, the coming of Christ. And then if any man shall say unto you, lo, here is Christ, or lo, he is there, believe him not. Believe him not. Even if it's me. For false Christ and false prophets shall rise and shall show signs and wonders to seduce, if it were possible, even the elect. But take heed, behold, I have foretold you all things. Everything is foretold to us, and Jesus spoke here to warn us about the coming of false teachers, false prophets, taking these verses and other verses out of context, applying them to scripture that they don't belong with, and causing error, which has hurt many that were believers or would be believers if they'd seen the right things. Anyway, in the early 1800s, and I'm sure it happened before then, but in the early 1800s, a Baptist preacher, and I can complain about a Baptist preacher because I'm a Baptist. Anyway, a Baptist preacher named William Miller took Daniel 8:14. He added a few other verses to it and calculated the time for the coming of Christ. His initial calculations were that in 1843, Jesus was going to come, and he modified that with some of his later calculations to say exactly on October the 22nd, 1844, that Jesus was going to return. About 100,000 people threw their money away, sat on housetops and some on mountaintops, waiting for the return on that day. And of course, nothing happened. Various ones have modified the calculations since then and have come up with other things that have developed other groups. But let's look at these verses that Miller used and see how he used those and what developed from that. Let's start with Daniel 8:14, and we're going to come back and we're going to study this in its context, but just taking it the way Miller took it. It says, "And he said unto me, unto 2,000, and 300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. Then shall the sanctuary be cleansed." Keep that in mind. Then jump down to verse 17, and we'll get to that one in our next study. But here it's used. So he came near where I stood, and when he came, I was afraid and fell upon my face. But he said unto me, "Understand, O Son of Man, for at the time of the end shall be the vision." Then we can go to some of the next verses that he used. Numbers chapter 14 and verse 34 says, "And after the number of the days which ye searched the land, even 40 days, each day for a year." Remember what this is talking about. This is talking about when Moses sent spies into the land. They searched out the land for 40 days, and Daniel says, "Each day for a year shall ye bear your iniquities, even 40 years shall ye know my breach of promise." 40 years they wandered in the wilderness. But now you take this verse, each day for a year, and you add it to Daniel, talking about 2,300 days, and you come up with 2,300 years. Folks, don't do things like that. Then in Ezekiel chapter 4, verse 6, says, "When thou hast accomplished them, lie again." Ezekiel is giving a sign of what's going to happen to the nation Israel. And here he's given some instruction. "When thou hast accomplished them, lie again on, on thy right side, and thou shalt bear the iniquity of the house of Judah 40 days. I have appointed thee each day for a year." This is Ezekiel's prophecy, not about all of the things that we're dealing with in Daniel. It's out of context, putting it with the book of Daniel. But, of course, Miller's calculations didn't go to waste. Ellen G. White, the supposed prophetess of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, had a vision. And her vision was that the temple that was cleansed, remember, that's what Daniel chapter 7 and verse 14 said, that the temple was going to be cleansed. Anyway, she came up with that the temple in heaven was cleansed at that point. I don't know why she thought the temple was not clean already in heaven. But anyway, let me make sure that you understand. Daniel chapter 8 is talking about two kingdoms, Medo-Persia and Greece. That's all. We've got another empire to go before we run into the things of the final things there. But let's go back to the interpretation there in Daniel chapter 8. It says, "The ram which thou sawest having two horns are the kings of Media and Persia." We went through all of the things of Media and Persia that Daniel had in that chapter. Verse 21, "And the rough goat is the king of Grecia, and the great horn between his eyes is the first king." That's Alexander the Great. We saw those things. We went through those things. And remember that in, that was the right way, there we go. we saw that we've got another kingdom to go, which is Rome, and then we've got to get to the 10 kings. The 10 kings that were in the toes of the image that Nebuchadnezzar saw, and the 10 horns that were there in the image that Daniel had seen. So we're going to study this, and we're going to start where we left off in verse 8, and we're just going to go to verse 14. Again, the goal of this study is to understand verse 14, and I hope in doing so it's going to give you some keys to understanding passages of Scripture other than these, that you read them in context. Anyway, to understand verse 14, we're going to have to do just a little peek at the original language. Remember, chapter 8, we came back to Hebrew. So it's in Hebrew here in the original language. If you want to read more about the history of Medo-Persia, there's just a small portion there in Daniel chapter 8. If you want to read more about that, go to the book of Esther. Go to the book of Ezra and Nehemiah and the prophets Haggai and Zechariah. They were there during the Medo-Persian Empire. Anyway, don't let it escape you that we've got another kingdom to go before we reach the end of the Israeli history in this. Okay? So, Daniel 8 does not touch that fourth kingdom. We're going to, as we study these, we gain more information about the Greek Empire. We've read all that we got in Daniel 8 about the Persian Empire. We've got a little more information and some good information about the Greek Empire and the single horn. At first, that horn was strong and went after the Medo-Persians, and he had great strength there in doing so. And I don't know what, there we go. I got a very sensitive mouse, and if I touch it, it jumps back a few things, even though I'm turning it in the right direction. Anyway, Daniel's second vision. This is his second vision. He had the first one that covered all four kingdoms. The second one only covers two. The first beast being Medo-Persia, and the second beast being Greece. Remember that the Medo-Persians returned Israel to the land and had them build the temple. And that's the temple where Jesus worshipped. Now, they had remodeled it before Jesus got there, but remember this, the beast representing each of those empires. Before we jump into the Greek Empire and the conquering that Alexander did there, I want us to look again at the Medo-Persian Empire and see what it was that Alexander actually accomplished. And it's important to realize that each one of these is a step to bringing Jesus into the world so that we could have the salvation that we've got. Remember, the Babylonians took Israel out. They were supposed to present the Lord to the whole world as they were, but they kind of messed up, and they became idol worshippers. He took them into Babylonian captivity to stop that idol worship. Then the Medo-Persians returned them to the land, rebuilt the temple so that we've got the setup that God wants there. followed by the Greeks, which went in and established a one-world language. A one-world language so that people could understand each other, sharing the gospel. Then Rome came in and they built roads so that people could travel back and forth between the various countries to present the gospel to people. And that's how we got the gospel. So we want to be very appreciative of all of these things. But I want you to see what it is that Alexander conquered. And to do that, I want to go to the book of Esther and read just a couple of verses here in the book of Esther to describe the size of that kingdom. It says, "Now it came to pass in the days of Ahasuerus," this is Ahasuerus, which reigned from India to Ethiopia, over 107 and 20 provinces. He had his nation divided into let's call them states, 127 states. That in those days, when King Ahasuerus sat on the throne of his kingdom, which was at Shushan, the palace. Now, I want us to see the kingdom of the Medo-Persians. And I want you to see here in this kingdom, I want you to see Assyria, Media, and Persia. And back here is India. Over there is Greece. Here is Ethiopia down here, through Egypt and to Ethiopia. And the Ahasuerus ruled all of that. That was the Medo-Persian Empire. Now, I want us to remember the basis that we found early in the book of Daniel in chapter 2 that gave us the facts of how this was to be controlled. And he, this is Daniel chapter 2, verse 21, and he, that is God, changeth the times and the seasons. He removeth kings and setteth up kings. Each of these kingdoms is set up by God. They didn't just happen. God set them up. And he, God, changeth the times and the seasons. He removeth kings and setteth up kings. He giveth wisdom to the wise and knowledge to them that know understanding. Now, again, here is the empire of the Medo-Persians, and all of that was conquered by Alexander. So, with that, let's go to the Greek Empire. We see that they actually moved a little further back into the area of India. The Medo-Persians just went to about here. This is Alexander went further back there, went deeper into Ethiopia, and evidently got some area over here. So this, and of course Greece itself is here. But this is what Alexander conquered. But, verse 8, we covered this last time, but I want you to see it again. Therefore, the he-goat waxed very great, that is, Alexander conquered all of that area, and when Alexander was strong, the great horn was broken. Alexander died. And for it came up 4 notable ones toward the 4 winds of heaven. This is a new image that we have here of the goat now having 4 horns. They're the 4 generals of Alexander. The kingdom, it took them 20 years to get the kingdom divided because Alexander didn't leave a plan. but the kingdom was divided among the 4 generals. And I want you also to remember, keep this in mind, this was given to Daniel in about 550 BC. Alexander came along in about 330 BC. Almost 200 years later, long after Daniel had passed away. But God gave this information to Daniel. God knew it all, and he was telling Daniel, and Daniel told us of the divisions of this kingdom. Now, back to the Greek Empire. You see how massive it is here. And it was divided, and we got 2 of the divisions that are going to be important to us. Two of the divisions are going to be important to us. First one is the Seleucid Empire. You see it here running down to the area where the little nation Israel is. Then the Ptolemy Empire, which handled the Egyptian area, and again is coming up. These guys fought back and forth over Israel. But anyway, that's the 2 empires that we're going to find as being very important to us. Primarily, we're going to be, in this particular study, dealing with the Seleucid Empire. The map doesn't show well all 4 of the divisions, but we don't particularly need those in our study anyway. But I want to give you a quick look at the Seleucid kings, because those are going to be the first ones that we're going to deal with. And it's not particularly important that you remember these, but we got 2 slides here showing those kings, and I got one marked there in yellow. That one becomes very important to this particular study. And I want us to go into verse 9 of chapter 8 of Daniel. It says, and out of one of them, out of one of the 4, out of one of them came forth a little horn, which waxed exceedingly great toward the south, toward the north, and toward the pleasant land. The pleasant land is Israel. Anyway, they went to the south and toward the east. That was, if you remember the empire, it went back toward India. Anyway, there's a little horn here. This little horn is part of the Greek Empire. It's not the little horn of the Roman Empire that we will see that we call the Antichrist. It's not him in this one. There is a little horn. And I think you can guess it's probably that one I marked with the yellow there. Anyway, be careful in dealing with these. This is dealing with 2 kingdoms only. So let's go to verse 10. It says, and it waxed great, that is the little horn, waxed great, even to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the hosts. The host is army. The host of stars. Stars, I believe, is Israel, and previously I had some scripture to show who that is, but we're not going to have time to go through those. Anyway, and stamped upon them. This is the action of the little horn. And I believe it's saying that it killed a bunch of Jews. Going on into verse 11. Yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host. He magnified himself even to the prince of the host. I believe that he magnified himself to be above Jesus. And by him the daily sacrifice was taken away. The daily sacrifice was taken away. and the place of the sanctuary was cast down. This guy magnified himself above the daily host. And again, I believe that this is the guy named Antiochus Epiphanes, Antiochus IV, and he named himself Epiphanes. The word Epiphanes means glorious manifestation. Now, I don't know how conceited a guy can be to think of himself as the glorious manifestation, but that's who he magnified himself to be. And he desired to create Zeus as the god. He actually made it against the law to worship anyone, to worship the God of heaven. And he wanted the Jewish priests to offer sacrifices to images of Zeus. He actually set up in the temple an image of Zeus to be sacrificed to there, and he actually killed mothers that were found with their sons circumcised. He outlawed the Mosaic covenant, and he burned scrolls of the Mosaic law. This was a pretty rotten guy. Anyway, this glorious manifestation in 167 BC is when he eliminated the sacrifices in the altar. He was there having the Jewish priest offer pigs on the altar, even in the temple. With that, let's go to verse 12. And a host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression, and it cast down the truth to the ground, and it practiced and prospered. Now, I wound up learning some new uses for the words that are used in modern Hebrew. The word tamid, there you see it in Hebrew and the pronunciation there in English. In modern Hebrew, that means always. And I started searching then through biblical lexicons as to the meaning. It's translated in our passage here as daily sacrifice. And what I see in the biblical use of the word is it means perpetual. It means the things that you continually do. And it's referring here to the sacrifices. That's what this guy Antiochus Epiphanes eliminated, was the daily sacrifices. That is, the sacrifices to Jehovah. And they were to offer these sacrifices 7 days a week. 2 offerings, one in the evening, one in the morning. It's commanded in Numbers 28, verses 1 through 10. And also we find it in the book of Exodus, that it's commanded there. Anyway, 2 sacrifices being offered every day. And it says 2,300, and our English says days. But let's go back to verse 12. Says, and the host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression. Remember, we're talking about the daily sacrifice here. And the host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression, and it cast down the truth to the ground and practiced and prospered. This guy desecrated the temple. He stopped the sacrifices to Jehovah. He put the heathen god up in the temple, and some of the priests moved away from Jerusalem because of this. We've got one priest named Matthias Maccabeus that went to a city called Modem. Now, I want to be careful telling you he went to the city. He may have already lived there, but he did his priestly work in Jerusalem. But Antiochus built an altar in Modem to Zeus and sent an emissary there to have the priest offer to that image. And the emissary ordered Matthias to offer a pig on the altar. He refused. Another priest picked up the pig and moved forward to make that sacrifice. And Matthias grabbed a weapon and killed that priest. Then his son, one of the sons of Matthias, killed the emissary. Many Jews at that point in time fled to the mountains. Think of Matthew 24. That's in the future. It's not this time, but that's the kind of thing they did. Here we got a picture of Matthias killing the priest who was going to offer the pig on that altar. Anyway, the Maccabee family formed an army. Matthias was rather old, so his sons actually ruled the army. But for about 100 years, the Jews were able to actually drive the Greeks away and rule their own land. They tore down the altars to Zeus, they cleansed the temple, and they resumed sacrifices to the real God. Verse 13. Then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto a certain saint which spake, listen to this, how long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice, and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden down underfoot, trodden underfoot. Now, always the question, how long, O Lord, how long? How long is this going to be? When are you coming back? But the question here is, how long are the daily sacrifices going to be stopped? What empire are we in? It's important that you answer that. This is the Greek Empire. It's not the Roman Empire that follows. This is the Greek Empire. And the word tamid is used there again about the daily sacrifices. And how many sacrifices are to be offered daily? 2 sacrifices daily. There are 2. What year was it that the sacrifices were stopped? I told you earlier, I hope you remember, it's 167 BC. The question, how long was this desolation going to last? The answer comes in verse 14. Let's go there. Excuse me, I didn't show all of those to you. But anyway, how long? And the answer came back, and he said unto me, unto 2,300 days. Then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. Now, the answer is a problem in English, but in Hebrew it's a great answer. It's 2,300 Erev Boker, meaning evening, morning. Now, if you go back to creation, you see evening, morning were the first day. Evening, morning were the second day. Evening, morning were the third day. And the translators took this and put in the word days there. But the real statement there is that there are going to be 2,300 evening, morning sacrifices that are going to be missed. Now, how many days is that? It's half that number of days because there were 2 sacrifices every day. So that's 1,150 days until the temple is cleansed. Now, we know, well recorded for a fact, that the temple was cleansed, rededicated on the 25th day of Kislev of 164 BC. If you Google that date, 25th day of Kislev, you come out and you find that was the 25th day of December, 164 BC. I'm not going to make a big deal out of that date. But the 25th day of December, the temple was cleansed. Now, that's documented, and they call that date a holiday called Hanukkah. Jesus celebrated that particular feast, and we find that, I didn't show you all those. We find that back there in John chapter 10, verses 22 and 23. It says in that verse, and it was at Jerusalem the feast of dedication. That's Hanukkah. And it was at Jerusalem the feast of dedication, and it was winter, December the 25th. It's winter time. And Jesus walked in the temple in Solomon's porch. The 25th of December is winter every year. Anyway, understand that there's some difficulty here. Now, I don't understand creating cults out of this, but the passage does have a proper interpretation, and that is that there were 2,300 sacrifices that were missed, and that's 1,150 days to give us the proper interpretation. I want to go back and read those 2 verses again, and I want to put in evening, morning there in the verse 11. It says, Then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto a certain saint which spake, How long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice, and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden under foot? And he said unto me, Unto 2,300 evening, morning, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. Now, get the point. There are 1,150 days. How many years is that? I want you to calculate that. If an engineer, it comes out to be something very close to pi. 3.14 years. Now, subtract 3 years from 364, and remember, you do that, and the number gets bigger. So, 364, and add the 3 years to that, takes you to 167 BC, which is when Antiochus Epiphanes stopped the sacrifices in Israel. And we don't have the exact date for Antiochus' order, but I can believe it's exactly 1,150 days. But that brought us to Hanukkah and the Maccabees. Now I've got to tell you the story here. I just told you that he killed the priest that was going to make that sacrifice to Zeus. But it took a little time for him to get the temple cleansed and ready. The army of the Maccabees was quite successful against the Greek army and kept them out and they were able to do that job of cleansing the temple and establishing the Mosaic law again. And that's a miracle in itself. Alexander's army, or the portion of it, that a fourth of it, was able to be driven away for them to cleanse that temple. But there's more. There's another miracle that is touted during the time there. The temple was cleansed, but a big decision had to be made. There's a menorah, a lamp in the temple, and it's supposed to be lit and it's supposed to burn every day. But they only had enough oil for one day, and it was going to take them 8 days to produce more oil. What were they to do? Were they to wait the 8 days to do the rededication, or were they going to go ahead and do the rededication and then have 7 days that the lamp was not lit? Anyway, they were supposed to trim the lamps every evening and put new oil in them. They had to make that decision as to what to do. They decided to go ahead and dedicate the temple. The 26th of December, priests went into the temple area to see what to do about the lamp. And they expected the lamp to be out of oil. But as a matter of fact, the lamp had enough oil for one day. They did the same thing on the 27th and 28th. Enough oil for one day. They did that for 8 days until they could produce new oil. And that's what Hanukkah is all about. They celebrate that for 8 days, and they give gifts to each other for 8 days, and they play a game with a thing called a sevivon, or a dreidel. Sevivon in Hebrew, or dreidel in Yiddish. Anyway, this is a thing that has a lot more story to go to it, and we don't have time for that in this study. But this was a thing that in my class in teaching this, I actually gave each one of them a dreidel. But I can't do that to you that are looking on the internet. Anyway, understand what's happened here. The Millerites that I told you about earlier calculated these 2,300 days, which are supposed to be sacrifices. That's what the chapter is about. That's the context of the chapter. Anyway, this was used by the Seventh-day Adventists as one of their major doctrines, and it's used to set up the Jehovah's Witnesses. It's used to establish a number of other cults and so forth. Well, what happens? This is what happens when you deviate from what the context is dealing with. 2 empires, not 4. Anyway, you can't just take verses from any place and stick them in any other place and expect God to honor that. One day we'll probably understand all of this a lot better, but remember from Daniel chapter 2, verses 21 and 22, says, "And he, God, changeth the times and the seasons. He removeth kings and setteth up kings." God's the one that set up these kingdoms, all in establishing the opportunity for Jesus to come and the gospel to be spread so that you and I could have the gospel. "And he changeth the times and the seasons. He removeth kings and setteth up kings. He giveth wisdom to the wise and knowledge to them that know understanding. He revealeth the deep and secret things. He knoweth what is in the darkness, and the light dwelleth with him. Jesus is coming back. Again, Jesus is coming back. We can't set dates. He told us not to set dates, but we can trust that Jesus is coming back. All of this happened hundreds of years. All of this that we read in Daniel chapter 8 there happened hundreds of years after Daniel was gone. But he believed. He didn't understand it. But the question is, are you ready for Jesus to come? We're told in Romans chapter 10, verse 9. Of course, we're told before this that all of us are sinners. We need to repent of that sin. But in chapter 10, verse 9 and 10 says that if thou shalt confess with thy mouth the Lord Jesus, and shalt believe in thine heart that God hath raised him from the dead, thou shalt be saved. For with the heart man believeth unto righteousness, and with the mouth confession is made unto salvation. Are you saved? Are you ready? All of this that we're studying in Daniel was in preparation for you to know this very thing right here. Are you saved? I hope you are. I hope to see you in heaven one of these days. Thank you for being with me.